discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. We want to continue to stress to the public the need to respect the safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts in Dragon, the teams working to recover them from the water, and the safety of those that come too close. For the safety of the crew and your safety, we'd recommend you continue to sit back and watch as we bring you live views of the astronauts' homecoming today.
Exactly. Safety is our #1 priority. And as I mentioned earlier, this deorbit burn is the last time that those 4 bulkhead thrusters on top of Dragon will fire. Dragon Endurance has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere, but this deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site off the coast of San Diego, California. Right now, Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill are using their screens to monitor the burn duration, Draco thruster firings, and trajectory details like entry angle, spacecraft perigee, and how much distance remains until deorbit burn termination. Dragon, again, is flying itself, so all the crew has to do is stay strapped into their seats and keep an eye on how their journey is progressing.
And we are now about 2 minutes into that deorbit burn, about 15.5 minutes to go. Things continuing to go as expected, and we'll continue to provide updates on that burn and duration as it happens.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier, SpaceX has been recovering Crew Dragon off the coast of the West Coast, off the coast of California. And today is NASA's first crew coming home back to the West Coast. Now, previously, NASA did do recovery operations off the West Coast, but with our NASA crew with SpaceX, we have been recovering the crew off of the East Coast previously until today. Crew-10 will be the first off of California.
Yes, it'll be an exciting milestone. And also, if you compare it a little bit to other spacecraft recoveries like Soyuz, which actually lands on land, SpaceX is a little bit unique in that aspect where we recover it in the water. So the recovery operations and things that have to happen are a little bit different. So currently aboard the International Space Station is Expedition 73. So a few days ago, there was actually a change of command ceremony where NASA astronaut Takuya Onishi handed over command to Roscosmos cosmonauts. And after departing the International Space Station yesterday, they went from 11 people on board to 7 people. So during that Crew-11, Crew-10 handover period after Crew-11 arrived on August 2nd, there was a few days of handover to get Crew-11 up to speed on space station operations and everything they needed to know before Crew-10 departed yesterday. Again, that departure taking place at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern. So now the crew size has gone back down to 7, which is pretty standard now, except for when we have those handover periods. And we're not expecting any new crew arrivals again until the next Soyuz mission, which will be towards the end of the year. And that will also be when Expedition 74 kicks off. And also on board the International Space Station as part of Expedition 73 are NASA astronauts Johnny Kim, along with the newly arrived Zena Cardman and Mike Fink. There's also JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Kimiya Yui, who is also part of Crew-11, along with Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Ryzhikov, Alexei Zubritsky, and the newly arrived Oleg Platonov, who was also aboard Crew-11 last week.
It's quite a few crew members on the space station. I do think that it's pretty cool that we've had presence on the laboratory for the last 25 years, and we're continuing that. Even with just 7 people, there's so much science and research that they can do while they're out in space.
You know, if you think about it, there's been someone orbiting above your head for the last 25 years, which is truly incredible if you think about it. The deorbit burn is, of course, continuing to take place. It's a little over 5 minutes complete, so we have about 12 minutes to go before that deorbit burn is complete. Again, we're expecting it to last a total of 17.5 minutes. Following deorbit and splashdown, Crew-10 will have spent 148 days in space, orbiting the Earth more than 2,300 times, traveling more than 62.7 million statute miles. The crew saw the arrival of 5 visiting vehicles since their arrival in March when they docked to the space station, and this included the Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft that carried NASA astronaut Johnny Kim to the station, SpaceX's 32nd commercial resupply mission, the 4th private astronaut flight, Axiom Mission 4, the Russian Progress 92 cargo spacecraft, and of course, the most recently, the arrival of the Dragon spacecraft carrying Crew-11. They also saw the departure of 6 visiting vehicles, including Northrop Grumman's 21st cargo resupply Cygnus spacecraft, the Soyuz MS-26 spacecraft that returned NASA astronaut Don Pettit back to Earth, SpaceX's 32nd commercial resupply mission, the 4th private astronaut flight, Axiom Mission 4, and the Russian Progress 90 cargo spacecraft. And following the completion of Crew-10 with splashdown later today, NASA astronaut and Crew-10 commander Anne McClain will have spent 352 total days in space across 2 flights, having previously spent 204 days in space during expeditions 58 and 59. And then JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi will have spent 263 days in space across his 2 flights to station. And then, of course, this was the first flight for both NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, so they will have both logged 148 days in space. And we are now about 7 minutes into the duration of the deorbit burn, about 10 more minutes to go until that is completed. During their stay aboard the International Space Station, both NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers conducted 1 spacewalk outside the orbiting laboratory. That spacewalk totaled 5 hours and 44 minutes. McClain has now conducted 3 spacewalks through the duration of her career for a total of 18 hours and 52 minutes spent outside the International Space Station.
Yeah, Anna, you mentioned seeing all the different vehicles that came to the space station while the crew was on board. If you haven't been following along with some of the crew members, like Nicole Ayers, she's been posting, and she actually posted after Crew-11 arrived at the space station, showed some really cool views of both Dragon Endurance and Dragon Endeavour, both docked to the International Space Station. Also, some cool spacewalk photos there you can see on your screen, and that is Nicole Ayers performing that spacewalk, which is really awesome.
And so she performed that spacewalk alongside her crewmate, NASA astronaut Anne McClain. And during that spacewalk, they did some preparation for a future IROSA, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Array, and those are being added to the International Space Station's existing solar arrays to increase the power generation and output for the space station.
Yeah, something that sometimes people don't know is that the astronauts are not only scientists, but they are also mechanics. They fix things. They have to go. Spacewalk sounds like maybe that's something fun to go out and do, but they're really going out there to fix something or install something new, which I think is really cool that they have all these very diverse skills that they're able to utilize. They're really the jack of all trades.
They really do have to be the jack of all trades. And of course, if you look at their backgrounds, they have engineering backgrounds, they have science backgrounds, but they have to be able to support all of those science and research investigations. And there currently on your screen, you actually see a photo of the Expedition 73 crew. It looks like they're all gathered together, sharing a meal inside the International Space Station. And so 11 International Space Station crew members in that photo gather inside the Unity module for a portrait. In the front row from left are Kimiya Yui of JAXA, or the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, Zena Cardman of NASA, Oleg Platonov of Roscosmos, and Mike Fink of NASA. And then in the second row are Nicole Ayers of NASA, Sergei Ryzhikov of Roscosmos, Anne McClain of NASA, and then in the back are Takuya Onishi of JAXA, Kirill Peskov of Roscosmos, and Johnny Kim of NASA, along with Alexei Zubritsky of Roscosmos. And right now we are about 10 minutes into the deorbit burn, over halfway complete with that burn, about 7 minutes to go until it is completed, setting Crew-10 and Dragon up for their re-entry into Earth's atmosphere a little bit after that.
Yeah, and that deorbit burn should complete around the 36-minute mark on that time to splashdown clock on the bottom center of your screen. But we will wait for confirmation to call that, but it should be around that 36-minute mark.
So here in this photo, 6 of 7 Expedition 73 crew members also posed for another portrait during dinner time at the galley inside the International Space Station's Unity module. Clockwise from bottom are JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayres, along with Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Ryzhikov, Kirill Peskov, and Alexei Zubritsky. So, of course, 4 of those crew members are returning today as part of Crew-10.
It's cool to see that they're still gathered around a table, even in space. But
most people are familiar with the idea of a mission patch, but you might not know how they come to exist. For decades, crew members have worked together to develop the patch for their mission, determining which aspects of the mission they want to highlight and any special details they'd like to include. The crew themselves can design their patch, or they can share their design ideas with an artist who makes it come to life. The Crew-10 patch is a 10-sided patch with the Roman numeral X boldly in the center, representing the 10th operational flight of the Dragon crew spacecraft. The Dragon, which is also the spacecraft's namesake, is depicted with its wings out in full flight, representing the 4 professional pilots that make up the crew complement. The Dragon is also illuminated by one of Earth's stunning and beautiful sunrises. It is focused on the International Space Station and its mission while keeping a watchful position above Earth. The stars on the patch are red, white, and blue for the flag colors of each crew member's home country, and the brightest stars represent the crew's closest family members and support system.
yeah, I love these patches. The detail that goes into them is so amazing. Almost every single stitch on them means something, and I love that the crew is able to come together and come up with a design that means something to them.
Yeah, it's always a meaningful experience that all has some sort of meaning and inspiration drawn from all areas of their life. Again, that deorbit burn is still underway. We're just under 13 minutes into the burn's duration. That burn expected to last 17 and a half minutes total. So just a few minutes to go there, and we're seeing some great live views again inside the Dragon Endurance spacecraft, which is carrying the Crew-10 members home, and you can see them actually monitoring the burn there on their screens. There in the center of your screens, of course, you have NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayres, the commander and pilot, respectively, of the Crew-10 mission.
And again, we are currently in that deorbit burn. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner that graphic showing the 4 bulkhead thrusters firing, all at different times. It takes a sequence of those thrusters firing to complete each and every burn. And again, this is the last time that these 4 bulkhead thrusters will be firing. Once this deorbit burn is complete, we'll start preparing the spacecraft for re-entry, and that'll come with closing the nose cone, so those thrusters will no longer be needed for the rest of their journey back home.
And you mentioned the nose cone, which will be closed. So the nose cone was initially opened following launch and orbital insertion of Crew-10. So when they first got to orbit, the nose cone was open to expose those guidance and navigation sensors on its way to the International Space Station. So it's been open this whole time as Dragon Endurance has been docked to the International Space Station. So once it closes, it'll be the first time that it's been closed since their launch and orbital insertion back on March 14th earlier this year.
Yeah, and in earlier Dragon spacecraft days, we did jettison the nose cone, but with reusability, this is one of the key improvements for reusing these Dragon spacecraft is being able to reuse the nose cone. So now we close the nose cone. It's not really needed during re-entry, but it is needed during ascent, during launch for the spacecraft. So being able to reuse it, close it when it comes back home, and then rinse and repeat.
And so we are about 15 minutes into that deorbit burn, less than 3 minutes remaining in that burn duration. You can see at the bottom right corner of your screen those thrusters continuing to fire for this burn to set it up for its entry and splashdown off the coast of San Diego, California, about 38 minutes from now, as you can see that countdown on your screen.
A great live view inside of the spacecraft. You could see some of those patches that were on near the seats of the spacecraft, showing the different crews that have flown on Dragon Endurance.
And right next to the thrusters on the bottom right hand of your screen, you can also see a map or a globe that shows where Dragon currently is. So right now it's off the coast of Australia as it continues to make its way off the coast of California. And there's less than 2 minutes remaining in the burn. The crew settled in and getting ready for their re-entry.
We are coming up on completion of that deorbit burn, expected in less than a minute from now. We will wait for confirmation.
And there you can see a good look in between NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers over the shoulder as they monitor that burn on either side, the right and left screens. You can actually see those thrusters firing on their screens as well. And in the center, you can see a map of their trajectory to head off the coast of California for their splashdown near San Diego.
Yeah, as we've been mentioning, this is a fully autonomous vehicle, so they're just monitoring, and they are hearing noises inside of the spacecraft, so being able to see what's going on outside of the spacecraft helps them understand what those sounds are.
And there's about 30 seconds remaining in the burn, so we should be hearing confirmation of burn complete pretty soon from the teams here in Mission Control, SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne.
You saw Anne McClain using her tablet there. They do have those display screens.
Dragon, SpaceX, deorbit burn complete and performance nominal. Trunk separation sequence initiated.
SpaceX, Dragon, copy nominal deorbit burn.
And we had confirmation that the deorbit burn is now complete and the trunk separation sequence is now beginning. This means that the umbilicals are going to disconnect and Dragon is going to separate or jettison from the Dragon spacecraft.
And we did just hear confirmation that the claw separation has been completed and that trunk separation should be taking place in about 30 seconds from now. So again, we're going to have several events happen in rapid succession now as we're just over 30 minutes away from splashdown.
And I was mentioning, you're seeing Anne McClain use her tablets. They have the displays inside of Dragon to monitor the vehicle, but they have those tablets to follow along with very specific procedures.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trunk jettison.
SpaceX, Dragon, copies nominal trunk jettison. We see entry prep.
And great news, we just heard confirmation of trunk separation. So far, telemetry is looking good. The nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield is now exposed and ready for atmospheric reentry.
So the trunk has now served its purpose by gathering energy from the sun through its solar cells and converting that to battery power. And since we have separated the trunk, Dragon can't generate any more new power, but they don't need it since we're coming home, and Dragon has stored enough battery power to be able to make its way home. And we are now hearing that the nose cone is starting to close, so that is currently underway.
Yeah, exactly. Dragon is now closing that nose cone to protect the forward hatch for re-entry. Now, once it's closed, it will be locked by a set of hooks. And in the background, Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete that deorbit burn, ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone shut for re-entry. And here's a great live view of that nose cone coming closed.
And the nose cone is over 25% closed so far, so happening pretty quickly. Also, the Dragon spacecraft has initiated the nitrox suit purge. This will help keep the Crew-10 astronauts cool and comfortable during re-entry, which is coming up in about 20 minutes. At this point, the crew are using their screens, as you saw a few minutes ago, to monitor the locking of the nose cone. And that nose cone is now about 50% closed and continuing to close. And of course, then we'll have the hooks to fully close it.
Yeah, that nitrox is going to be very important because during reentry, the outside of the vehicle gets really, really hot, about 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So keeping the crew cool throughout that period is going to be very important.
We are expecting that nose cone to be completely closed in about 2 minutes from now at 8:02 a.m. Pacific, 11:02 a.m. Eastern. So we're continuing to monitor the progress of that nose cone closure. And again, you're seeing great live view of the nose cone closing. That camera on the nose cone actually showing it in progress.
Yeah. And as Anna mentioned, this is a view looking forward on the spacecraft as that nose cone is coming closed. And we're getting closer and closer as the screen gets a little bit darker there to that nose cone closure.
And it's almost fully closed at this point, and then after that happens, it'll just have to be hard mated. They'll reattach those hooks, and it'll be all set up and ready for re-entry now that we've had the trunk jettison and the claw separation and the nose cone almost fully closed. Of course, that deorbit burn also completed about 10 minutes ago as well. And we did just hear confirmation that the nose cone has been fully closed, so that process is now complete.
And as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon is now beginning to inject cooled nitrox into the air, being delivered to the suits worn by Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill.
Again, this is what will allow the crew to remain comfortable while external temperatures reach that 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And the heat shield is pointing forward, leading Dragon to the landing site. Again, that splashdown site targeted off the coast of San Diego, California.
And speaking of that heat shield, Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of Pika 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. First generation Pika was initially developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system.
And SpaceX actually partnered with NASA to develop Pika X, which was the second generation product used on all Dragon 1 commercial resupply services missions, or CRS, that resupplied the space station on 20 missions. Pika 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down cost and mass.
The remainder of Dragon is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection, which is lighter weight versus Pika and protects the underlying composite structure during reentry to ensure the structural capabilities are maintained.
And while Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit during peak reentry conditions, the characteristics of the TPS, or the thermal protection systems, coupled with the egress, or environmental control and life support system in the pressurized interior of Dragon, will ensure that Crew-10 stay cool and comfortable during all phases of reentry through splashdown.
Yeah, and that's very important. They are going through a lot of dynamic events, especially that re-entry period. And while it gets hot around the vehicle, the crew is going to be experiencing a lot of movement, vibration as they're re-entering. So we want to help make sure that they're cool, that they have a temperate temperature inside of the cabin, as well as those suits. And the suits really act as an extension of the spacecraft.
And now that the nose cone has closed, those hooks are driving closed as well. So the first set of 6 hooks have fully closed, and that second set of hooks are now traveling, and then we will have it completely closed and stowed and ready for reentry. Again, we are less than 30 minutes away from the targeted splashdown, about 28 and a half minutes until that splashdown, targeted for 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, off the coast of San Diego, California.
And after Dragon Endurance has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the crew's descent. First will be the 2 drogue chutes, followed by the 4 main parachutes to guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching back in March of this year. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the spacecraft detect that they are at the right speed and altitude.
And the vehicle velocity at the time of the drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 18,000 feet. Vehicle velocity at the main parachute deploy is approximately 119 miles per hour, and they deploy when the spacecraft is about 6,500 feet. And then at the time of splashdown, the vehicle velocity will have slowed down to approximately 16 miles per hour. The highest G loads the crew will experience during reentry is approximately 3 to 5 Gs.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible how well those parachutes work. Those drogue parachutes are really important. They're two very small chutes, but if we didn't have those to help slow down the vehicle initially, we'd actually have to make the main parachutes about 3 times as big as they currently are.
Yeah.
So.
And so coming up, we will have a loss of signal. We're about 15 minutes away from that happening. It'll typically last around 7 minutes before we reacquire signal. With the Dragon spacecraft, again, this is completely expected. It happens during every reentry, and it's due to all of that plasma buildup on the spacecraft. And again, the team there on the left-hand side of your screen.
Dragon, SpaceX, nose cone secured for entry.
SpaceX Dragon copies.
And we did just hear confirmation that the nose cone stow is fully complete, so all of those hooks have closed and it is prepared for that reentry phase. And again, on the left-hand side of your screen, you're seeing a live look inside the SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California. And those teams are, of course, going to continue to monitor the progress of the reentry operations. And as soon as they come out of that loss of signal that we'll have in a few minutes, they will call back up to the crew and check in on how they're doing and get prepared for a splashdown.
Yeah, the team here in Mission Control actually monitors the crew from launch all the way till they arrive at the space station. And then we hand it over to Mission Control Houston while they're on board the space station. And then this crew, again here in Mission Control, will monitor the crew as they undock and come back all the way down, all the way until they're safe back on land, actually.
Yeah, so during the dynamic operations for arriving and departing the International Space Station, the two mission controls are actually in what's known as integrated operations. So yesterday, during undocking and departure of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft and Crew-10, the SpaceX Mission Control team and the NASA Mission Control team in Houston were working in tandem during that operation until Dragon exited what is known as the approach ellipsoid, which is one of those two invisible boundaries surrounding the International Space Station that guide arriving and departing visiting vehicles to the space station.
Yeah, and I did say back on land, but I meant back on planet Earth. Once they're out of the spacecraft, then we have the medical teams checking in with the crew, making sure that they're safe, healthy, and then they'll take a helicopter ride back to land to continue their research. They do still have to get checked out, and the mission doesn't completely end right when they land back on Earth. They do still have a little bit more research to complete.
And so right when they exit Dragon, once they are on the recovery boat, again, the recovery boat is the Shannon. We're actually hearing reports that the recovery boat is staged and ready for splashdown and ready to receive the crew. But it'll begin with medical evaluations on the boat, and that will progress through exercises that improve mobility, balance, flexibility, aerobic conditioning, strength, endurance, and the body's ability to sense its position.
Dragon, SpaceX for final entry briefing. Report when ready to copy.
SpaceX Dragon, we're ready to copy.
Dragon, I have no deltas to the previously briefed times. Predicted comm blackout starting at 1520 Zulu and ending at 1527 Zulu. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon, we copy. No deltas in 1520 to 1527 for comm blackout.
That is a good read back, Dragon. The vehicle is healthy, weather is still looking good, and recovery forces are on site. I have one final reminder that the Vehicle 1 Rio LED on your control panel is unavailable. The health of the flight computer and avionics can be monitored on your displays. SpaceX will make expected calls regarding automated chute deployment. Any questions for our team?
SpaceX Dragon, Crew-10 has no questions. And we'll see you all shortly.
Copy on the no questions. And with that, can you please verify that visors are down, tablets are secured, and restraints are tightened no later than 150 kilometers?
Copy, will do.
And we did just hear that briefing between the core, the Crew Operations Resource Engineer, and the Crew-10 astronauts aboard Dragon to confirm their readiness for re-entry. We are expecting that communications blackout to take place about 9 minutes from now. Again, it'll last about 7 minutes during that re-entry phase as they start to return to Earth's atmosphere and the gravity associated with it. Again, while they were aboard the International Space Station, of course, they were in the microgravity conditions, so it does have some impacts on the human body. So the returning astronauts will undergo the same pre-flight tests to assess their health status, and these results inform a personalized reconditioning program to restore their physical performance safely and progressively to their pre-flight baseline. Post-flight reconditioning is unique for each astronaut and varies by individual. While most crew members reach their pre-flight fitness baseline within the first 45 days of returning to Earth, it is not uncommon for NASA to extend reconditioning programs to meet an astronaut's specific needs and pace of recovery. So, of course, we have a whole team that will be supporting the astronauts in their recovery. We have folks supporting them as part of NASA's Human Health and Performance Directorate, and there's a whole team specifically focused on strength conditioning and recovery as well. And so during their mission, Crew-10 contributed to more than 200 unique scientific experiments across about 600 hours of science and research and technology demonstrations during their stay aboard the orbiting laboratory. One of those experiments was the rhodium plant life experiment, and this investigation studies how radiation and gravity environments at different orbital altitudes affect plant growth by comparing Crew-10 data with plants flown aboard the Polaris Dawn mission, which flew deeper into space. Studies have shown microgravity affects growth rates, and a better understanding of the mechanisms behind this could improve plant growth techniques in space and on Earth. As mentioned earlier, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers also conducted a spacewalk to upgrade the International Space Station's power generation systems. The duo installed hardware to support an IROSA, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Array, which are more compact and produce more power than the station's original arrays. The IROSAs were first demonstrated aboard the orbiting laboratory in June 2017. And 8 have been installed to augment the power available for scientific research and other activities. During their mission, Crew-10 also used the International Space Station's Space Automated Bioproduct Laboratory to process samples for a study of microgravity's effects on the protein yield of microalgae. These organisms are highly nutritious, producing amino acids, fatty acids, B vitamins, iron, and fiber. The microalgae could provide sustainable meat and dairy alternatives during long-duration space missions. It also could be used to make biofuels and bioactive compounds and medicines in space and on Earth. And the International Space Station, of course, orbits more than 250 miles above Earth, giving astronauts a unique view.
SpaceX Dragon, tablets are secured, restraints are tightened, visors are down, crew is ready for entry.
SpaceX copies. Crew are configured for entry. We are 5 minutes until predicted comm blackout. See you on the other side at 1527 Zulu.
Dragon copies. See you there.
And there we did just hear some additional communications between the core here and SpaceX Mission Control and Hawthorne and the Crew-10 astronauts aboard the Dragon Endurance spacecraft, confirming that their visors are down on their reentry suits and they're preparing for the re-entry and splashdown activities to come. We are expecting that communications blackout in less than 5 minutes from now, as we target that splashdown in just about 18 minutes from now at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern off the coast of San Diego, California. So again, a little bit about the science that the crew had been conducting during their 5 months aboard the orbiting laboratory. As the International Space Station orbits more than 250 miles above Earth, it gives astronauts a unique view of their home planet where they can photograph familiar places and interesting phenomena. While passing over a stormy night, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers captured images of simultaneous lightning bursts at the top of 2 thunderstorms. Scientists used instruments installed on the space station to study lightning and other weather conditions in Earth's upper atmosphere. This research helps protect communication systems and aircraft while improving atmospheric models and weather predictions. And you can see a view of that photo there just on your screen. It's quite beautiful. And we're about 4 minutes away from that communications blackout. Another one of the experiments that the crew contributed to was the Apex 12 investigation, which examines how space radiation affects telomere activity in Thale crest plants. Telomeres, which are repetitive DNA sequences that protect the ends of chromosomes, become shorter each time a cell divides and indicate cell aging. The Apex 12 investigation could clarify the role of telomeres in aging and diseases and help scientists equip plants and other organisms for the stress of long-duration spaceflight. And to round it all out, one of the other experiments they conducted was using a fluorescent microscope known as ELVIS, which captures the motion of microscopic algae and bacteria in 3D, a new capability aboard the International Space Station. The technology could be helpful in various applications in space and on Earth, such as monitoring water quality and detecting potentially infectious organisms. And so we are now about 3 minutes away from that communications blackout, and during that we'll also have confirmation that entry begins. It typically happens about 2 minutes after the initial loss of signal with the spacecraft. We'll begin that entry process.
Yeah, the communications blackout is expected at 8:20 and through 8:27. So some other cool photography while on station. Dragon docked to the International Space Station, soars 259 miles above Cambodia in this long-duration photograph revealing star trails, lightning storms, and the city lights of Southeast Asia streaking below. And I love these incredible views that they get, and they get to take these photos that we get to see, even though we don't get to be up there in space with them. Just an incredible view.
And we are now about 2 minutes away from that communications blackout, a little less than 2 minutes. And then after that, the entry will begin. We did hear that the nitrox and suit purge is underway, and they are beginning all of those entry preps. So again, we will stand by as we continue to hear from the team and as we enter this communications blackout in just a few moments.
Yeah, and the suits are there. They're an extension of the spacecraft. They help keep the crew cool, but they also have features just in case there's a depressurization inside of the cabin to help keep the crew safe and healthy during re-entry. It's unlikely to happen, but we have those suits just in case, and the suits are flame resistant. They have 3D printed helmets which are attached. Basically, the IVA intravehicular suits are used for just inside of the spacecraft, so not like the EVA suits that we were showing earlier. They're only used for inside of the spacecraft, and again, they help flow nitrox through the suit, help keep the crew cool, as well as providing them oxygen through these dynamic events as they're coming back down to Earth.
And during Crew-11's launch, we actually noticed Mike Fink has a new IVA suit, so he's debuting a new one. You can't really see too much of the details unless you look real close, but it'll be rolling out real soon.
Yeah, there was a lot of lessons learned from the Polaris Dawn mission with the SpaceX EVA suits that we've translated to the IVA suits. So Mike Fink is the first one to wear the upgraded one, but then Crew-12 is actually expected to wear all of the new designed suits. So that's pretty exciting.
It will be exciting, and we are just moments away from that communications blackout, about 10 seconds until that is underway. And so again, we are expecting that communications blackout to begin here, and it'll last approximately 7 minutes due to plasma formation around the spacecraft. And during this blackout, no vehicle telemetry is received by Mission Control, which you're seeing a live view of Mission Control on your screen, or by the recovery team, which is staged out off the coast of San Diego, California. And no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible.
And as a reminder, Dragon is designed to fly itself, so during reentry, the vehicle will be slowing down from orbital velocity, which is approximately 17,500 miles per hour. The top temperature Dragon will experience upon reentry is 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, which is really hot. The blackout period is expected to last about 7 minutes. Again, it has begun at 8:20 a.m. this morning. Again, expected to be complete at 8:27 a.m. And we're not going to hear any comms right now because we know that we have a loss of signal at this moment. But at the expected 8:27 a.m. time frame, we'll start to hear some comms from the core to the crew, checking in to see if they have acquired the acquisition of signal again.
And during that 7-minute comms blackout is also when the entry phase begins. So that is expected to begin about a minute from now at 8:22 a.m. Pacific, 11:22 a.m. Eastern time. And so things will be really ramping up. Again, during re-entry, the vehicle will be slowing down from its orbital velocity, which is approximately 17,500 miles per hour. And the top temperature that Dragon will experience during that re-entry is about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, and we do have windows on Dragon, so the crew, at least the two passengers next to the windows, are going to get to see that plasma buildup, which we've heard is a great view of all the different colors that the plasma creates as it's coming back through the Earth's atmosphere.
And so on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you can actually see some of the vehicle data. So then once we have the signal reacquired, that will update a little bit. But before that reentry, they were at an altitude of about 82.5 kilometers. So continuing to come back down again as the International Space Station itself. So when it was docked, it was at about 260 statute miles above Earth's atmosphere.
And less than 11 minutes until splashdown of the Crew-10 crew. And again, they're currently in a blackout period, so we're not going to have any visuals. We're not going to have any comms for a few more minutes. We're about 2 minutes into the blackout period, about 5 minutes left.
And or right after that splashdown, a lot of things will happen in rapid succession. So it takes about 45 minutes from splashdown until the boat is fully onto the recovery boat, the Shannon, which is staged out in San Diego, California. And then after it is hoisted up onto the boat, the hatch will be opened and we will welcome Crew-10 back aboard the boat, and they will begin those medical checkouts and evaluations before they are flown back to shore off the coast of California, and then from there they will be prepared to fly back to Houston and begin their full recovery and be greeted by friends and family. And so we're now a little over 3 minutes into the communications blackout, about 4 minutes to go. The vehicle should be experiencing that entry phase right about now. Once we have that communications back, we'll have those initial comm checks, and about 2 minutes after we reacquire that signal, we do expect the drogue parachutes to deploy, followed in rapid succession by the main parachutes deploying. Again, that will slow the vehicle down even further to about 16 miles per hour at the time of splashdown. Again, we are less than 10 minutes away from that targeted splashdown, expecting it around 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern.
And the really cool part about the Dragon spacecraft is we're actually utilizing the Earth's atmosphere, that re-entry, to help slow the velocity of the vehicle significantly from 17,500 miles per hour down to about 350 miles per hour is when the drogue parachutes will deploy. And then after the main chutes are deployed, by the time that the vehicle splashes down onto the water, it's about 16 miles per hour. So really, really slow compared to how fast they've been moving for the last 5 months.
And then once they splash down, it's pretty quick. Those initial 2 fast boats will get out there within moments, a minute or 2 after splashdown, and they will conduct those initial safety checks. So they will screen for hypergol and make sure everything is okay for the recovery teams to approach. Some of the teams will also then get onto the spacecraft and begin safing it and prepare it to lift up onto the boat, and other teams will be working on the parachutes and gathering those up. Again, we are about 2 minutes away from the expected acquisition of signal. That initial loss of signal took place about 5 minutes ago during that reentry phase as a result of all the plasma buildup. Again, it's completely expected, and it happens during every reentry of a spacecraft from its journey in space. Again, Crew-10 is returning after an about 5-month science and research mission aboard the International Space Station. They initially launched aboard a Falcon 9 rocket out at Kennedy Space Center in Florida on March 14th, and then docked shortly after that to the International Space Station. They spent 5 months doing all of that science and research, and then they undocked yesterday at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time to set them up for today's re-entry and splashdown. And we are expecting that acquisition of signal to take place about 90 seconds from now, so a little bit more than a minute to go until we hear those call-ups from the core to the crew to check back in with them, and less than 7 minutes to go until we have splashdown.
Yeah, it's getting very exciting here. I'm sure the crew is very excited to make it back home to planet Earth.
And there on your screen on the bottom left, you can actually see the telemetry catching back up.
You see them getting very close to the coast of California.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, we have you loud and clear.
I have you the same, Dragon. Expect automated chute deployment.
Dragon copies.
And so we did just hear that call up from the core, the crew operations resource engineer here in SpaceX Mission Control, to the Crew-10 astronauts currently aboard Dragon. Confirmation that we have reacquired signal with the Dragon spacecraft, and you can see that the speed is rapidly slowing down as it begins its final phase, and we will have confirmation of those parachutes deploy in just a few moments.
Yeah, you can also see the altitude in the bottom left-hand corner. You can see it getting closer and closer back down to Earth.
GPS converge. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deployment.
And the core just informing the crew of what's going on. They're going to be feeling a lot of different things inside of the spacecraft where they can't see what's going on outside. So they will expect the drogue parachutes to deploy, so they'll know what that feeling is inside of the spacecraft. And again, you can follow along the altitude in the bottom left-hand corner as the crew is getting closer and closer to planet Earth.
And we are expecting those drogue parachutes to deploy a little bit after 8:29 a.m. Pacific, 11:29 a.m. Eastern.
And the crew there on your screen rotating in their seats in preparation for that splashdown. During that reentry, they are leaning more on their backs, but when they are coming in for splashdown, they can sit a little bit more upright in preparation for that touchdown.
And on your screen from left to right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers.
Brace for drogue window.
NASA astronaut Anne McClain and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. Again, they are getting prepared for that drogue deploy, which should be happening in just a few moments from now. Again, we expect that a little bit after 8:29 a.m. Pacific, 11:29 a.m. Eastern, and it will be followed shortly thereafter by the main parachutes deploying. And there you're seeing a live look as from the recovery team, a helicopter that has a camera tracking the spacecraft during its reentry. We do have confirmation that the drogue deploy is underway.
There are those two drogue
Visual
chutes.
and 2 healthy drogues.
healthy drones. Copy healthy drones.
And a great live view from the spacecraft itself, seeing those two healthy drogues deployed.
And the spacecraft has now slowed down to less than 200 kilometers per hour, and it is now just over 2 kilometers above the water as it prepares for splashdown, and we should have that main parachute deploy in just a few moments to continue slowing the spacecraft down to about 16 miles per hour at the time of splashdown.
There's the main chutes deployed. They're going to open up here shortly.
Main chute descent rate nominal.
And we do have confirmation and a visual
Dragon
view.
copies. Dragon copies.
1,000 meters. 1,000 meters.
And
We copy 1,000 meters.
And there's a great look of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft as it makes its way to its splashdown site off the coast of California under those 4 main parachutes that have now deployed and about 900 meters away from the water surface.
Dragon, 800 meters. Dragon, 800 meters.
800 meters.
Crew monitoring their altitude as they make their way to splashdown. I love these daytime views that we get. We don't always get to pick the time when the crew splashes down, but it's awesome when we have a great morning and a clear view watching as the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying Crew-10 is...
SpaceX Dragon, 600 meters. SpaceX Dragon, 600 meters.
I copy 600 meters.
Crew just 600 meters away from splashdown.
And just over a minute away from that targeted splashdown time, again expected around 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern. Now about 500 meters away from the surface of the water. And slowed down to about 35 kilometers per hour. Again, it'll continue to slow down.
SpaceX Dragon, 400 meters. SpaceX Dragon, 400 meters. Splashdown. Brace for splashdown.
SpaceX copies 400 meters and crew are braced for splashdown.
We just saw an incredible view there of the Dragon as it re-entered under some cloud cover. And we should be regaining some of those live views from the recovery zone momentarily as it gets resituated to capture the return. The spacecraft is now about 200 meters above the ocean, and it has slowed down to about 30 kilometers per hour. Again, it will continue to slow down until about 16 kilometers per hour. And there we can see another live look of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft carrying Crew-10 back home to Earth following their 5-month mission, moments away from splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon, splashdown. SpaceX Dragon, happy splashdown.
SpaceX copies splashdown.
And we did just hear that confirmation of splashdown. The view that you're seeing on your screen is a little bit delayed, which is why we don't have that visual confirmation yet, but we do have that verbal confirmation between the crew and the Corps that they have successfully splashed down, and Dragon Endurance has now returned home. And there is that live look of Dragon Endurance as it sits on top of the ocean off the coast of San Diego, California.
Dragon, SpaceX, we see the onboard for Power 1 28-volt converter. No crew action required at this time. Stand by for more words.
Dragon copies, no crew action on the caution. Dragon copies, no crew action on the caution.
Dragon Endurance has now returned home, and NASA astronauts Anne McClain, Nicole Ayers, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi,
and SpaceX Dragon for step 1.2. And SpaceX Dragon for step 1.2. 800, we see 4 fired.
and
Dragon, we see the same.
And Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are back on Earth after an approximately 17.5-hour return journey from space, completing their 5-month mission aboard the International Space Station.
The SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they will now start to make their way to the splashdown location. The teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away, so it's going to take them about 30 minutes to make their way to Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill inside of Dragon.
And so we did have splashdown happen on time at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern off the coast of San Diego, California. And so we are eagerly awaiting that recovery. There are a few steps that take place before the crew can exit the spacecraft. First, those fast boats will go out to the recovery location to conduct some initial safety checks, test for hypergol, and ensure that everything is safe and ready for the recovery teams to approach, and then proceed through those following steps to get the capsule back onto the recovery boat, the Shannon. And so the Shannon will make its way out to the specific recovery location. It takes about 30 minutes for it to get out there. So by the time the safety and hypergol checks.
Dragon 3.1 are upright. Anyone?
We copy Stable 1. On behalf of SpaceX, welcome home. 50 system safety verifications are in progress. I will report back when recovery personnel are en route.
SpaceX, Dragon, entire Crew-10. Thank you for that flight. Truly an honor of a lifetime. That last 20 minutes. I think 20 minutes. I think it was a carnival ride. We get in the back of the line and we go again. Thanks for the safe landing. We'll see you shortly.
And so you did just hear some congratulatory words between the SpaceX teams here in Mission Control and Hawthorne, as well as NASA astronaut Anne McClain, who's the commander of Crew-10, so exchanging those celebratory words as they are now successfully and safely back on planet Earth following their mission aboard the International Space Station. And for those of you who are just joining us, this mission has gone smoothly so far, and Dragon successfully splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, just about 5 minutes ago.
Approximately 17.5 hours prior to splashdown, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, the deorbit burn, to place itself on a trajectory towards San Diego, California. Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. And we'll now follow the final part of Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill's journey as Dragon is lifted out of the water and placed onto the recovery boat.
And upon detection of landing, Dragon does automatically release the main parachutes to prevent wind from pulling the spacecraft. And then Dragon automatically safes any pyrotechnics still present on the vehicle and may automatically perform additional minor system reconfigurations. The astronauts do remain seated and in their suits at this point, but the onboard air conditioning keeps things temperate inside the spacecraft, and the communication systems on board remain powered so the crew can continue to communicate.
Now, SpaceX has 2 fast boats in the recovery fleet, which have moved quickly to the splashdown point, and you can see one of them there on your screen next to the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. They are being followed by one of the main recovery vessels, which will move into position upon upwind of the spacecraft. The 2 fast boats have very specific roles. The first approach is focused on immediate safety inspection of the spacecraft integrity and checking for any presence of hypergolic propellant vapors, ensuring that it's safe for the recovery vessel to approach Dragon. Now, once Dragon is cleared for full approach, the team begins rigging the spacecraft for water recovery by the recovery ship. The second fast boat is responsible for parachute recovery and also serves as a redundant boat to the first. And we'll see a team member on a jet ski soon helping to gather up the detached parachutes.
And it does take about 10 minutes for the recovery crew to complete their safety checks. And then once complete, the team will begin preparing Dragon to be lifted onto the recovery vessel, the Shannon, today. As part of the preparation for this lift, one member of the recovery team will climb on top of the spacecraft so they can attach Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. It will take less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. After those initial medical checkouts, the crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter, and if no additional medical assistance is needed, the crew will then board a waiting NASA plane and depart for Houston and make their way home. And so just about 7 minutes ago, Dragon Endurance did return home, and NASA astronauts Anne McClain, Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishin and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, are back on Earth after an approximately 17.5-hour journey from space.
SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they're now currently making their way to the splashdown location. The teams have been ready and waiting.
Dragon, SpaceX, we are go for recovery personnel to approach the capsule. Expect fast boats alongside in about 1 minute.
Copy 1 minute. Copy you guys are on it. Thanks. You guys are on it. Thanks.
And so we did just hear confirmation that the recovery boats or the fast boats have been given the confirmation to proceed. So those recovery steps will soon commence. Again, it takes about 10 minutes for all those safety checks to be completed. And we actually have a team member out on the recovery boat who we will be hearing from momentarily to get her perspective. And so joining us from the recovery vessel is NASA Public Affairs Officer Reagan Scharfetter, who had a first-hand view of the crew returning and splashing down. Reagan, can you hear us? And how was the view from the recovery vessel?
Hey there, Anna and Jesse. How do you hear me?
We hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. Well, seeing splashdown firsthand was a moment I assume others on board will play back for the rest of time. We were stationed within 1.5 nautical miles from the splashdown zone off the coast of San Diego and had fairly decent visuals from the Shannon recovery vessel. The cloud ceiling is actually higher than originally forecasted at around 1,100 feet, which gave us a little more room to see the Dragon spacecraft coming in on this misty morning. Even with these cloudy skies, though, we were able to witness the 4 white and orange main parachutes before Endurance descended down into the Pacific Ocean. And now we're just eagerly awaiting our Crew-10 members to join us on the ship very soon.
That's very exciting, Reagan. I'm so happy that you have that firsthand perspective. You mentioned the cloud cover a little bit, but overall, how have the landing conditions been from your perspective?
The landing conditions were nominal this morning and within limits in regard to sea state, winds, and cloud ceiling. There was also some excitement earlier on board when we spotted not only whales, but also a pot of dolphins and a shark out on our starboard side. Currently, it's about 66 degrees out with 5 mile per hour winds and what has been described as a pretty mild sea for the ship, but what could be more of a rougher ride for the capsule itself. Irregardless, after spending 146 days aboard the International Space Station, I think this crew is going to be more than thrilled with this fun reintroduction to the planet.
We're going to have to keep our eyes peeled for some whales over here, I guess. But can you tell us a little bit about the recovery journey to get to this point?
Yeah, absolutely. One standout part of this recovery is that Crew-10 actually marked the first crewed
Dragon,
NASA mission.
SpaceX, hypergol sweeps and unfired ordnance checks are nominal. Rigging is in progress. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift. We have flight surgeons standing by. Please confirm crew are ready for PMC.
Copy 5 minutes. Copy 5 minutes to lift. Crew's
So we did just hear some communication there, about 25 minutes to
Copy,
lift.
Dragon. The next call you hear will be from flight surgeon on Dragon to ground private.
Dragon copies.
And you can see that view there of the 2 fast boats and that rigging underway. Reagan, do we still have you? Do you want to continue on about the recovery journey to get to this point?
Yes, absolutely. As I was saying, one standout part of this recovery is that Crew-10 marks the first crewed NASA mission to return to the Pacific Ocean since 1975. That's 50 years ago when the Apollo-Soyuz mission ended. The landing zone shift from the Gulf and Atlantic sites shows the commercial crew program's continued flexibility and adaptations to mission needs, but this doesn't go without paying attention to new perspective challenges like marine layer and visibility issues, as well as some rubber sea states, which we are getting a slight taste of today. These are also conditions the Artemis II recovery team will be tracking ahead of their mission next year, which too will conclude with a splashdown off the Pacific coast. For today's operations, though, we started the morning by flying a series of helicopters out to the vessel. The recovery director and crew support teams were on the first flight out to help get the ship ready. And about 2 hours before splashdown, 2 fast boats and a jet ski were then placed into the water. I was on the second helicopter out here and landed on the ship
Dragon,
about 90.
SpaceX comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, we have you loud. Dragon, we have you loud and clear.
Copy, Dragon. I have you loud and clear with a slight echo. For your awareness, we're going to step into transitioning the forward link now. Comm will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
Dragon copies. Dragon copies.
And we did just hear those comm checks, and we have heard that the crew has reported that they're feeling well following their splashdown. Reagan, go ahead and tell us about your helicopter ride out to the recovery zone.
Yes, as I was saying, I was on the second helicopter out here and landed on the ship about 90 minutes before splash. And I just have to say, I have never seen an execution quite like this before. Teams have been working nonstop across various disciplines all week in lockstep with each other, just making sure that every detail was in place for Crew-10's successful return.
That's incredible, Reagan. So what's next for retrieving the crew?
Up next, Endurance will be hoisted onto the vessel and pulled toward the egress platform on Dragon Nest at the aft end of the ship. Safety checks will then be performed before opening the side hatch to ensure there are no hypergolic vapors present. And once confirmed, NASA and SpaceX medical personnel will assist the crew out of the capsule one by one. Once the crew exits the capsule, they'll undergo medical evaluations in the med bay, and soon after that, they'll board the first helicopter out, head to the airport, and then take a NASA plane back to Houston to begin their post-flight activities. I will say, as a first-timer out here, it's important to mention that seeing a spacecraft-shaped comet shoot down from the sky has just been an incredible joy to experience. And I know I can speak for the rest of the ship when I say that it's even more exciting to be able to welcome home Anne, Nicole, Jakuya, and Kirill. In the meantime, though, we'll keep you updated every step of the way out here. And with that, I will send it back to you guys out in Hawthorne.
Thank you so much, Reagan. It's incredible to hear your point of view and your perspective from the recovery ship, the Shannon, an invaluable point of view to have for today's broadcast. Towards the end of Reagan's comments, she did actually mention the Dragon Nest, where Dragon will be hoisted up onto, and you can see a little bit of a live view there on the edge of your screen. So that is where Dragon will lift up onto once it's ready, and then once it's safely there, we'll actually move inward a little bit. And then from there, the hatches will be opened and the crew will be extracted out. During the extraction of the crew, they are typically assisted, and that's completely normal. And that's completely normal during these operations. Again, they have been in the microgravity environment for about 5 months. And so some reconditioning needs to take place to reacclimate themselves to Earth's gravity.
And this is a view from the recovery vessel, but we did see the recovery teams preparing.
Dragon, SpaceX, forward link transition complete, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, we have you clear with a slight echo.
Dragon, we have you the same without an echo.
Sounds like they are trying to...
Copy. Echoed but readable.
Trying to update the comms link, as we did hear an echo from the Crew-10 crew as they were talking to the core. But now it sounds like we may have reversed the echo, where we're not hearing it any longer, but the crew is now hearing the core on an echo. So I'm sure they're going to continue to troubleshoot that to get some clear comms during these last few moments of recovery. Currently, Crew-10 is still inside of Dragon, still in the ocean, waiting to be lifted onto the recovery ship. The recovery team is rigging up the spacecraft in preparation for that lift, basically adding the straps necessary to lift Dragon out of the water, which will be lifted with the hydraulic lift on the recovery ship, and then into that nest that we were seeing earlier. Then they'll translate to that deck that we saw on the recovery vessel. And then finally, the hatch will open. They'll take their first breath of fresh air in a little under 5 months.
And so you are seeing a live look inside the SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne. As soon as we have good views of the recovery again, we will of course share those with you. Sometimes the cameras and the equipment out there just has to be restationed to get some better views during these recovery operations. So again, the crew did splash down aboard the Dragon Endurance spacecraft at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, a little under 20 minutes ago. And so it does take about 30 minutes until the recovery ship fully arrives out there, and that's also around the time that that rigging of the Dragon capsule will be complete. So a little bit after 9 a.m. we should see that rigging fully completed, the recovery vessel right up next to Dragon and being prepared for that hoist. And you can see that live look there of the recovery ship, the Shannon, which has made its way out to the splashdown zone. And you can see Dragon Endurance spacecraft, which currently has the Crew-10 astronauts seated inside as they get closer and closer to each other to prepare for that lift onto the recovery ship. And again, this splashdown took place off the coast of San Diego, California today. It was the first West Coast splashdown and recovery of a NASA crew, and the last crewed recovery for a SpaceX mission was Axiom Mission 4 just last month.
And again, we are in the Pacific Ocean at this moment. But the last NASA crew, Crew-9, splashed down off the coast of Florida. They had some dolphins to greet them. It sounds like from Reagan's point of view, they saw some whales, some dolphins, even a shark out there. So we got a lot of sea members waiting for this crew to come back home.
Giving them a warm greeting back to Earth with the animals that are only here.
Dragon, SpaceX, rigging complete, approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
SpaceX Dragon came in broken and did not catch the second half. I understand rigging is complete.
5 minutes until capsule lift.
Copy, 5 minutes.
And for those of you who are just joining us, the Crew-10 members comprise of NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, alongside JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, safely splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California about 20 minutes ago at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern Time. And right now you are seeing a live look from the recovery boat, the Shannon, which is preparing to hoist Dragon up onto the Dragon nest, which you are seeing there on your screen. And then from there, they will continue preparation to open the hatch and welcome the Crew-10 crew back onto Earth as they take their first breath of fresh air after 5 months aboard the International Space Station as part of Expedition 73.
We did hear a call that lift is under 5 minutes away, and you could see the recovery teams as they're rigging up the spacecraft, getting ready to hoist it up. And you could see a recovery team member standing on the outside of the Dragon spacecraft, helping to prepare the vehicle for that lift.
And as part of the preparation for the lift, one of those recovery team members, likely the one we're seeing on the spacecraft right now, will climb to the top of the spacecraft so that they can attach Dragon's hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. So recovering a spacecraft is a very complex operation. And so there's a lot of teams involved. And of course, since it is splashing down in the ocean, they do issue some notices to mariners to make sure that the area is clear. And we work closely with the United States Coast Guard to ensure the safety of not only the recovery team and the crew, but as well as other people that may be out in the Pacific Ocean today.
Yeah, we've made sure that this area is clear for these final operations, as it does take some time after splashdown to prepare the spacecraft, safe the spacecraft, prepare the spacecraft for lifting onto the vehicle, making sure that the recovery teams are safe. Once they lift the spacecraft onto the deck or into that, what we call the Dragon's nest on the recovery ship, they'll also continue to do some safety checks to make sure that the thrusters on the Dragon spacecraft don't have any more gases leaking from them, and then they'll cover those up. Again, continuing to prioritize safety first as we get the Crew-10 crew ready to exit or egress the Dragon spacecraft.
And so that whole recovery process, from splashdown to getting the crew out of the capsule, takes less than an hour. So we should expect to see the crew and their smiling faces in hopefully about 30 minutes or less from now. Again, they splashed down a little less than 30 minutes ago at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, off the coast of San Diego, California. This followed a 17.5-hour phasing journey following their departure and undocking from the International Space Station yesterday, August 8th at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern. And so you can see that line that is connected from the recovery ship onto Dragon as it tugs its way in, and that recovery crew member making its way to the top of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. And again, that recovery member is up there as part of the preparation for the lifting of the spacecraft onto the recovery vessel. They are there so that they can physically attach.
Brace for capsule lift.
Still think that's one of the best jobs.
Copy, cruise brace.
So they have physically attached those hoist rings and connected the lifting lines, and now they are preparing to lift the Dragon Endurance spacecraft onto the Shannon recovery boat momentarily. And you did just see that live look of the recovery member as he jumped off of the spacecraft and into the Pacific Ocean and is now back on one of the fast boats. And those fast boats were some of the initial recovery ships or recovery vehicles out at the splashdown location.
And again, we heard those comms to the crew, notifying them to prepare for the lift. Again, they can't see very much outside of the spacecraft, so knowing what operations are happening helps them understand what those moves that they're feeling are, so they know what to expect.
And once they begin that lift, it takes less than 10 minutes or so for it to be completed. And so it'll be safely inside that basket there at the end of the ship, where the Dragon's egg, or Dragon's nest is what it's known as. And then about 10 minutes or so from then, it'll be ready for hatch open. And you do see that lift is now underway as the Dragon Endurance spacecraft makes its way onto the recovery ship, the Shannon, that is staged off the coast of San Diego, California, following splashdown of the Dragon Endurance and the Crew-10 astronauts currently aboard.
And as this is happening, the crew is still strapped in to their seats with the 5-point harnesses. And they'll remain strapped in through the translation of the spacecraft to the deck and until the medical officer actually greets them. Then they will begin to unbuckle themselves and start egressing the spacecraft.
And so Dragon will remain in the nest during the crew extraction and then for the journey back to port. So that lift of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft just happened.
Stand by for translation to egress platform.
Dragon copies.
And so that lift of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft is now complete. You can see it there on your screen safely in the nest on the recovery ship. And so that translation to bring it forward and closer into the ship to then prepare to open the hatches will begin momentarily. You can see some of the crew member or the recovery members there doing their final inspections and safety checks of the spacecraft before they begin that translation. And then once that translation of the spacecraft is complete on the SpaceX recovery ship, the hatches will be opened. And we do expect that to take place probably in about 10 to 15 minutes from now. And once open, a SpaceX medical doctor will be the first one to check in on Ann McClain, Nicole Ayers, Takuya Onishi, and Kirill Peskov and see if they are ready for egress or getting out of the spacecraft. And while Dragon's top hatch is used to connect to the space station, the astronauts will actually egress or exit from Dragon's side hatch, pending capsule orientation in the water. Of course, we did see that it splashed down in orientation 1, so that the nose cone was facing up, which is the preferred orientation. And so before opening the hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment. And then once the hatch is open, that will be the crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding their spacecraft at the start of their journey last March. Again, they lifted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida on March 14th of this year.
And it's important to note that Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill will be getting assistance from the recovery teams while exiting the spacecraft. This is the same process for any returning long-duration crew members, as returning to a gravity environment can wreak havoc with our vestibular system responsible for maintaining balance and motion. Safety is our #1 priority and with this operation, so you'll see the crew members helped out of the spacecraft one by one and assisted the few feet to the medical quarters aboard the boat.
And if you've ever watched crews return on a Soyuz, 2 of our crew members today had actually previously flown on a Soyuz, Ann McClain and Takuya Onishi. This is the same process as when astronauts are carried from the Soyuz capsule to waiting chairs on the steppe of Kazakhstan and then carried to a waiting medical tent. This is also the period where any time-critical cargo can be recovered from the spacecraft, with the remainder waiting until the ship is back in port.
Once the ship and spacecraft return to shore, the recovery team will perform additional inspections before loading Dragon onto a flatbed truck at the SpaceX facility in Cape Canaveral for post-processing.
And so we mentioned earlier all of the science and research that Crew-10 conducted during their 5-month mission aboard the International Space Station. So in addition to some of the physical and biological science experiments that they conduct, they too themselves are human research subjects. So a lot of teams work to gather samples from the crew throughout their mission to see how the microgravity environment of space actually impacts the human body. So NASA does have the Human Research Program, which is responsible for a lot of that science and investigation. But of course, there's also researchers outside of NASA that use the microgravity environment aboard the International Space Station to conduct their science and research. We do have the International Space Station National Laboratory that helps to facilitate a lot of that other research as well.
And those research experiments, especially with the human body, are extremely important, especially for, we call these long duration missions 5 to 6 months long, but if we're going to be going to the moon, planets like Mars, we're going to need to stay a lot longer, and we're going to need to know how to keep the human body healthy throughout that time. What happens in these microgravity environments, and how can we better prepare the humans for going on these even longer duration missions?
So the International Space Station does serve as sort of a testing and proving ground for NASA's future Artemis missions to the moon and then on to Mars. Of course, we can't necessarily do all science and research in the microgravity environment due to various factors. So teams on the ground also do what are known as analog research experiments. Also, a lot of that is based out of our Human Research Program. So one of those, known as the Human Exploration Research Analog, or HERA, does some isolation and confinement research inside of an analog setup that's supposed to simulate a spacecraft. Another one of those analogs is known as CHIPEA, or the Crew Health and Exploration Research Analog, which actually simulates a stay on the surface of Mars for about a year. So while this International Space Station does do a lot of great research, some of that research can also be done on the ground in preparation for those long-duration exploration missions to the moon and Mars.
And you can see on your screen, the Dragon spacecraft is now translating forward to that deck that we saw earlier. Again, that deck is the height just below the hatch, which will make it a lot easier for the crew to egress the spacecraft.
And so right before that translation took place, a couple of the recovery team members did do some final safety checks of the spacecraft to ensure that it was safe and ready to go for additional people to approach the spacecraft and to begin those hatch open preparations and operations to get Crew-10 out of the spacecraft and back on Earth. And for those of you who are just joining us, Crew-10 did safely splash down about 40 minutes ago off the coast of San Diego, California, aboard a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft known as Endurance. Endurance did fly on 3 previous missions, Crew-3, Crew-5, and Crew-9. So this was the 4th flight of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. It launched to the International Space Station about 5 months ago on March 14th from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Following that launch, it had a journey to the International Space Station where it was then docked and remained for about 5 months for all of that science and research that Crew-10 conducted. And then yesterday at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern, Dragon and the Crew-10 crew safely undocked from the International Space Station and made their way back to Earth. They had an about 17.5-hour journey from that undocking until their splashdown, which again took place at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern today. And Crew-10 again is comprised of NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. And so we are now just standing by for the hatch opening of the Endurance spacecraft to welcome the Crew-10.
Stand by for side hatch opening and egress.
So that hatch on the Dragon Endurance spacecraft is now open, and teams are working to get Crew-10 out and back on Earth. Again, they will be initially checked out by a SpaceX medical director. You did just see him go in there a moment ago to make sure that they are feeling okay and are ready to egress or exit the spacecraft.
We are also seeing the recovery crew install that hatch seal protection. This helps protect both the seal of the hatch on the spacecraft as well as the crew as they're exiting the vehicle.
And so that hatch was officially opened at 9:10 a.m. Pacific, 12:10 p.m. Eastern Time, following a splashdown at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern off the coast of San Diego, California. Again, they are doing some initial medical evaluations, and then they will be prepared to egress or exit the spacecraft and take their first breath of fresh air. Again, they will be assisted out of the spacecraft. That is completely normal. And then from there, they will go just a few steps and to do some additional medical checkouts. And then after the egress is finally complete and all 4 crew members are out of the spacecraft, they will take a helicopter back to dry land. And then from there in California, they will then board a NASA plane and make their way back home to Houston, Texas.
You can see the recovery team again preparing for that egress or exiting the spacecraft. They are using some aids. There's going to be a little bit of a ramp to enable the crew to easily exit the spacecraft. Instead of taking that large step, they can use that ramp to exit.
And recovering the crew is a bit of a joint operation. So we do have team members from NASA's Flight Operations Directorate out there, as well as NASA's Commercial Crew Program, and some flight surgeons from the NASA and international partners that will be prepared to retrieve and receive the crew following their egress or exit from the spacecraft. So it'll be nice to see some familiar faces, friendly faces, as they've worked with all of these teams in preparation for their space flight, and they will be greeting them upon their return.
You can see that the crew is removing some of their cargo that looked like their tablets that they were using to follow along with every procedure throughout the entire mission and ride on Dragon.
And after the crew is extracted or egressed out of the spacecraft, they will remove some additional cargo that's time critical. Often that is cargo that needs to be chilled for whatever reason, scientific samples and such that need to be in a specific environment. So that will be immediately offloaded after the crew exits the spacecraft. And then any additional cargo will be offloaded after it makes its way back to port off the coast of San Diego, California.
Looks like those are the footrests being removed that allow the crew to get out of their seats a little bit easier.
You do see one of those beds or slides that they use to help extract the crew. So we should see some of that egress taking place momentarily.
If you're just now joining us, you are watching the Crew-10 mission as we await the 4 crew members, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, egress the Dragon spacecraft here shortly. They just recently, in the last 10 minutes, were able to take the first breath of fresh air in about 5 months. So we're excited to see them stand with gravity for the first time in 5 months.
And so they will likely be assisted, so we might not see the first steps, but they will be assisted out of the capsule. And it is important to note, since they were under the microgravity environment, their muscles, their bones, all of their systems haven't been exposed to Earth's gravity in over 5 months, which of course has some impacts on the human body, which is some of the important research that is done on the International Space Station to actually see how the human body is affected by the environment of outer space. And so that hatch did open about 6 minutes ago at 9:10 a.m. Pacific, 12:10 p.m. Eastern, following a splashdown at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, off the coast of California. Following that splashdown, the recovery team went out to meet the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. First out were the 2 fast boats, which began some safety checks and also began to safe the spacecraft in preparation to be lifted onto the recovery vessel, the Shannon. And the Shannon did arrive to the splashdown location less than 30 minutes after splashdown to then lift the spacecraft up on board the Shannon, and now we're just awaiting the crew to exit or egress the spacecraft. It does look like they are preparing for that crew egress here in just a moment. And the first Crew-10 crew member has now successfully egressed or exited the capsule. And that is NASA astronaut Anne McClain. She looks very excited to be back on Earth, given a arm pump. And the other 3 crew members should be following behind here shortly. So just moments ago, we did have NASA astronaut Anne McClain make her way out of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft, and now we are just standing by for the egress or exit of the following 3 Crew-10 crew members to complete the recovery process. So we are standing by for the egress of NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, and Roscosmonaut Kirill Peskov. And the second Crew-10 crew member has successfully egressed the capsule, and that is NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers. So both NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers have successfully egressed or exited the capsule. Anne McClain served as the Crew-10 commander, and Nicole Ayers served as the Crew-10 pilot for this mission. So the final 2 crew members that we are awaiting are JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. You did just see them removing 2 additional foot restraints, likely preparing to egress the final 2 Crew-10 crew members.
If you're just now joining us, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers have already egressed or exited the Dragon Endurance spacecraft. And again, we are waiting for the final 2 Crew-10 members to exit. JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov are still inside of the Dragon spacecraft.
And so the crew did complete a 148-day mission, with 146 of those days docked to the International Space Station. During that time, they completed more than 2,300 orbits around the Earth, traveling more than 62.7 million statute miles. And NASA astronaut Anne McClain, who was the first to exit the spacecraft, has now totaled 352 total days in space. This was her second space flight. Her previous mission was aboard a Soyuz spacecraft. And then this was the first space flight for NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, who was the second to exit the spacecraft. So she now has 148 days in space. And we do just now see JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi has exited the spacecraft. And this was also the second space flight for Onishi. So across his 2 missions, he has now totaled 263 days in space. So we are now just standing by for the final crew member of Crew-10 to make their way out of the spacecraft, and that is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov. To recap a little bit, the Crew-10 mission launched aboard a Falcon 9 rocket inside a Dragon spacecraft, which you're now seeing on your screen. That launch took place from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida on March 14th. The crew then had a journey to the space station and docked shortly thereafter, spending about 5 months attached to the orbiting laboratory, conducting science and research before undocking yesterday, August 8th at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern, for a 17.5-hour return journey back to Earth, splashing down off the coast of San Diego, California earlier this morning at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, which was less than an hour ago. And they are working to egress the final crew member. The initial 3 crew members have already safely exited the spacecraft, and those are NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. So the egress of Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov is now underway, and you can see him making his way out of the spacecraft right now. And there you have Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov waving as he takes his final or initial steps on Earth. And he will now be taken back to some additional medical checks. And with that, all 4 Crew-10 crew members are safely back on Earth. They have all egress. And so now that NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, are safely back home on planet Earth and getting checked out by the NASA medical team, we are going to go ahead and wrap up our live coverage of their return. After a successful liftoff and separation from Falcon 9 back on March 14th, Crew-10 made their way on board Dragon to the International Space Station and completed a 148-day mission in space. NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers conducted 1 spacewalk during their 5 months in space on May 1st, relocating a space station communications antenna and the initial mounting bracket installation steps for an IROSA, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Array, that will arrive on a future SpaceX commercial resupply services mission. With their full duration mission coming to an end, the crew began packing up their personal items for their return to Earth about a week ago and worked through tasks and shared lessons learned with Crew-11 teams as they arrived to the space station a few days ago.
Their journey home began when they closed the hatch to Dragon and undocked from the space station at 3:15 p.m. Pacific or 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, August 8th. After 4 successful departure burns and a phasing burn to line up their orbit, Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill rested for a few hours before waking up to prepare for re-entry this morning. Dragon performed an approximately 17.5-minute long deorbit burn to send Dragon on a path home. That burn ended at 7:57 a.m. Pacific Time, 10:57 a.m. Eastern, and this was followed by trunk separation and Dragon's final on-orbit maneuver, closing of the nose cone at 8:02 a.m. Pacific Time, 11:02 a.m. Eastern. The spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere and slowed its descent with successful deployments of 2 drogue parachutes and 4 mains, with the final splashdown occurring off the coast of San Diego, California at 8:33 a.m. Pacific Time or 11:33 a.m. Eastern. Following that successful splashdown, we saw SpaceX recovery experts move in and prepare Dragon Endurance for its lift on the recovery vessel. And just a little less than an hour following splashdown, we saw Anne, Nicole, Takuya, and Kirill make their way out of Dragon and into the recovery ship's medical facilities safe and sound.
And next up, they'll catch a helicopter flight back to shore while they're transferred to aircraft that will take them home. The astronauts will take a NASA plane for the short flight back to Houston. They'll then be reunited with their families to bring an end to this mission. It's been an honor and privilege to share their journey with all of you as we continue this new era in human spaceflight.
And return today marks the end of the direct handover we executed after successfully launching the Crew-11 mission to the space station just last week on Friday, August 1st. Thank you, as always, for joining us for this morning's coverage of the splashdown of Crew-10. Remember to follow SpaceX on X and NASA online and on social media for updates for the very latest on crew and cargo flights to and from the International Space Station.
And we'll continue to share the progress of Anne McLean, Nicole Ayers, Takuya Onishi, and Kirill Peskov on social media as they travel back home. We will also have a post-splashdown media teleconference coming up at approximately 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, where leadership will share a final update as we conclude this successful mission. And you can tune in live on NASA's YouTube page and through nasa.gov. From all of us at NASA and SpaceX, thank you for joining us and welcome home, Crew-10.